The cowboy paid $2 for a native girl, she warned him. You'll regret this. I won't obey. The sun had just started climbing above the dusty horizon, panting the small frontier town in shades of gold and orange. It was the kind of town that seemed frozen in time, where every building was made of weathered wood, the streets were lined with horse droppings, and the air carried the scent of livestock and campfire smoke. In this rough-and-tumble place, life was harsh, and people did what they needed to survive. A young cowboy named Eli rode into town on his worn brown horse. Eli was strong and tall, with broad shoulders from years of riding and working the land, but his eyes carried the kind of impatience and ambition that often led men into trouble. He was looking for something, anything, that might make his life easier or more interesting. For weeks, he had been searching for someone to help him on his small ranch on the outskirts of town. He needed a hand with chores, someone who could fetch water, tend to the animals, and maybe even cook a meal or two. But the harshness of frontier life meant people were expensive, and most were unwilling to work for little pay. As he walked down the main street, Eli noticed a small crowd gathered near a wooden wagon. Curious, he guided his horse closer and saw a scene that immediately caught his attention. On the wagon sat a young native girl, probably no older than 14 or 15. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves over her shoulders, and her eyes, large and striking, scanned the crowd with an intensity that made even the roughest men step back. She was surrounded by traders who were calling out to townsfolk trying to sell her services. Her posture was stiff, her hands folded in her lap, and her lips pressed together in a firm line that betrayed both fear and defiance. The traders were speaking in loud, coarse voices, boasting about the girl's supposed usefulness. "Strong worker, clever and quick." "We'll do what you need," they shouted, waving their hands. But the girl's response was clear to anyone who cared to notice. She shook her head, her eyes flashing with anger and warning. "You'll regret this!" "I won't obey," she said firmly, her voice trembling only slightly.
Eli felt a strange pull in his chest.
Part of him was startled by her bravery. Most people, he thought, would have cowered, lowered their heads, and said nothing. But she was different. Her words cut through the noise of the traders and the murmurs of the crowd, leaving a silence that made some of the men shift uncomfortably. Eli leaned forward in his saddle, studying her face. There was a fire there, a spirit that refused to be tamed. The traders noticed his interest and began to call out, trying to draw him into the deal. "Hey there, cowboy. She's perfect for your ranch. Only $2. Strong, smart, and ready to work." Eli dismounted slowly, keeping his eyes on the girl. He knew $2 was a small price, far less than hiring anyone else in town for even a day's work. Still, there was something about her words that made him pause. "Do you always talk back to people who try to help you?" Eli asked, his voice calm but curious. The girl didn't answer. Instead, she looked at him steadily, her gaze holding a challenge he wasn't used to facing. The crowd began to murmur again, some men shaking their heads in disapproval, others chuckling at the unusual scene. Eli walked closer. He could see the bruises on her hands and arms, marks from rough handling, most likely. But they didn't seem to diminish her pride. Instead, they seemed to highlight it. The girl was not someone who would simply follow orders out of fear. She was aware of her own strength, even if the world around her was not. The trader sensed his hesitation and pushed harder. "Come on, cowboy, don't waste your chance! $2! She's ready to go!" But the girl interrupted them with another warning, louder this time. "I will not obey! You cannot command me! You'll regret it if you think you can make me your servant!" Her words hung in the air. Eli had dealt with many people in his life, workers, merchants, even lawmen, but never someone who spoke to him with such boldness. He felt a strange mix of irritation and admiration. He knew he could pay the money and take her to his ranch, but the idea of control, the sense that she might not follow his instructions, both frightened and intrigued him. Finally, Eli reached into his pocket and pulled out $2 silver. The coins were worn, but they glinted in the morning sun. Without another word, he handed them to the traders, who quickly counted the money and nodded. "You've got yourself a deal, cowboy," one of them said. Eli turned to the girl, ready to take her from the wagon. The girl's eyes did not waver. "You'll regret this," she said once more. There was no fear in her tone now, only certainty. She stepped down from the wagon herself, landing lightly on the dusty street. Eli helped her mount a small horse he had brought along, though she barely needed assistance. Her posture was straight, her hands steady on the reins. As they began the ride toward his ranch, Eli tried to break the silence. "I know this seems strange to you, but I need someone to help me." "I'm not trying to hurt you." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked around at the open land stretching in all directions, the tall grasses swaying in the wind, and the distant mountains glowing in the sunlight. There was a sadness in her eyes, a hint of loss for a life she had been taken from, but there was also resolve. After a long stretch of silence, she finally spoke. "I am not yours. You may have bought me for 2 coins, but I do not belong to you. You will see that I cannot be controlled." Eli didn't reply. He wasn't used to being challenged in this way. Most people he dealt with accepted their place, but this girl was already teaching him a lesson about underestimating others. The ride continued in tense quiet. The wind whipped around them, rustling the leaves and carrying the distant calls of birds. Eli noticed the strength in her grip, the steady way she handled the horse, and he began to understand that the girl was more than just a worker. She was clever, capable, and unbroken. And though he had made the decision to purchase her services, he realized that he might have underestimated the challenge that lay ahead. By the time they reached the outskirts of his ranch, the sun was climbing high into the sky. The land stretched out in golden fields, dotted with wooden fences and grazing cattle. The ranch was small but functional, with a modest cabin at the center. Eli hoped that once they arrived, the girl would settle in and begin her tasks. But as he looked at her, standing tall on the horse, he understood that this would not be easy. The girl dismounted gracefully, her eyes scanning the ranch as if measuring everything. She walked toward the cabin with confidence, clearly aware that she was in unfamiliar territory but refusing to show fear. Eli followed, trying to hide his growing unease. This girl, who had cost him only $2, was already making him question his assumptions, his authority, and his understanding of control. As she stepped inside the cabin, she paused and turned to him. "Remember what I said? I am not here to obey. You may have bought my presence, but you cannot own my spirit." With that, she began to move around the cabin, inspecting it, noting its strengths and weaknesses, and preparing herself for what lay ahead. Eli watched silently, realizing that the true work was only beginning. Not just for her, but for him as well. The morning faded into afternoon, the shadows growing long across the dusty floors. Eli found himself reflecting on the girl's words. He had purchased her out of necessity and perhaps a bit of pride, but now he saw that $2 silver could not buy compliance, respect, or trust. The girl had warned him from the very beginning, and her warning was not just a challenge. It was a lesson he would have to learn if he hoped to coexist with her. That day marked the start of a journey neither of them could have predicted. The cowboy, confident in his experience and strength, was about to discover that some things, like spirit, courage, and independence, could never be bought. And the girl, fierce and unyielding, would begin to navigate a world that had tried to confine her, refusing to let anyone break her will. The first step of their uneasy partnership had begun, and neither could yet imagine how it would shape the days, months, and perhaps even years to come. The next morning dawned crisp and quiet on the ranch. A thin layer of mist hung over the fields, and the rising sun painted the wooden cabin in soft shades of gold. Eli woke early, as he always did, and stepped outside to check on the animals. Horses neighed softly in the stalls, and the cattle grazed lazily in the fields, their shadows stretching long across the dewy grass. Everything seemed calm and ordinary. Yet the memory of the girl's words, her warning and defiance, lingered in his mind, like a small, stubborn flame he couldn't put out. Inside the cabin, the girl was already awake. She had spent the night on a simple straw mattress in the corner of the room. The cabin was small but sturdy, with a fireplace, a wooden table, and a few chairs. She had inspected every corner, noting the weaknesses and strengths of her new home. Though it was unfamiliar territory, she moved with quiet confidence. Her thoughts were focused on survival and understanding the man who had brought her here. She knew that respecting herself meant keeping her independence even in a place where she had very little control. Eli called to her, trying to sound calm. "Breakfast is ready! Come, eat!" The girl did not rush. She took her time, finishing her morning chores silently and deliberately. She swept the floor with careful, precise strokes, straightened the table, and filled a bowl with water for the horse outside. Then finally she joined Eli at the table.
He watched her carefully. "You don't have to do all that," he said.
"Just sit and eat!" But she shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "I do what I must," she said simply. The tone was polite yet firm, and Eli realized that every action she took had meaning. It was a quiet rebellion, one he could neither ignore nor easily stop. Breakfast was a modest affair: bread, a bit of salted meat, and water. The girl ate slowly, savoring each bite while Eli watched, unsure of how to approach her. He wanted help on the ranch, but he was learning fast that she would not follow orders blindly. She had warned him from the start, and now he understood that he would need patience, respect, and perhaps even humility to work with her. After breakfast, Eli led her to the barn. He had expected that showing her the animals and the tasks to be done would be straightforward, but she was not interested in being guided. She moved among the animals with careful observation, noting their behavior and learning quickly how to handle them. She fed the horses, brushed their coats, and cleaned the stalls, but she did so in her own way, not the way Eli had imagined. Eli frowned at first. "That's not how I do it," he said, trying to assert his authority. The girl looked at him steadily, calm and unwavering. "I do it this way. It works," she replied. Her voice was gentle but firm. Eli felt a surge of frustration, but also something else: admiration. She was learning, adapting, and thinking for herself. That was more than most people did when they were told what to do. As the morning passed, the tension between them slowly transformed into a silent understanding. Eli began to notice small details about her that he had not seen before. The way she handled the animals with care, the way she remembered even the smallest instructions, and the way her eyes seemed to take in everything around her. She was not just strong, she was intelligent, resourceful, and observant. Despite her independence, she also observed Eli closely. She watched his movements, listened to his words, and began to understand the rhythms of the ranch. She realized that he was proud, stubborn, and used to controlling the people around him. Yet she also saw that he was inexperienced in dealing with someone like her, someone who could not be commanded or intimidated. This gave her confidence. She could survive here, not by obedience, but by careful strategy and self-respect. By midday, Eli decided it was time to rest. He sat on a wooden bench outside the cabin, wiping sweat from his brow. The girl joined him after finishing a few tasks, sitting quietly beside him. For a long while, neither spoke. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees. Birds called from the distance, and the ranch seemed to breathe in a steady, peaceful rhythm. It was in this quiet moment that Eli began to reflect on his own life. He thought about the choices that had led him here. The long days on the trail, the endless chores, and now the decision to purchase the girl. He realized that he had underestimated her. He had thought that $2 silver could solve his problems, but he was discovering that the real challenge was not in paying for her presence, but in earning her respect. The girl broke the silence, speaking softly. "You do not understand yet," she said. "I am not here to make your life easier. I am here to survive. But if you treat me with respect, perhaps we can work together. If you try to control me, you will fail." Her words were measured, not a threat, but a truth that could not be ignored. Eli nodded slowly. He did not fully know what to say. Most people he met had followed instructions without question. This girl did not, and that unsettled him. But he also recognized that she was right. Control could not be forced, only earned. Perhaps this was a lesson he had needed all along. The afternoon brought new challenges. A small group of cattle had wandered near the edge of the property, and Eli decided it was time to teach the girl how to herd them. He assumed it would be a simple task: drive the cattle back into the pen, use his voice, and rely on his experience. But the girl surprised him. She observed the animals carefully, noting their behavior and movements. Instead of rushing in, she moved quietly, predicting where the cattle would go and positioning herself accordingly. Eli followed, amazed.
You're good at this, he admitted.
The girl glanced at him, her expression calm. I watch, I learn, and I act. That is how one survives, she said. Her words were simple, but they carried wisdom beyond her years. Eli felt a mix of pride and humility. He had expected obedience, but instead he found competence and intelligence. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in deep oranges and purples, Eli and the girl returned to the cabin. The day had been long and exhausting, but also revealing. Each had learned more about the other. Eli about her strength and determination, and she about his character and limitations. Though there had been tension, there was also the beginning of mutual understanding. Inside the cabin, the girl prepared a small meal while Eli tended to the horses. They moved in quiet coordination, not because of orders, but because of a shared rhythm that was slowly forming. It was a fragile connection built on observation, respect, and necessity, rather than fear or authority. As night fell, they sat outside, listening to the sounds of the ranch. Crickets chirped, the wind rustled the trees, and distant howls echoed from the hills. Eli thought about the warning she had given him that first day. I won't obey. You'll regret this. He understood now that her words were not meant to intimidate him, but to prepare him. They were a promise and a challenge. The girl looked at him quietly, as if reading his thoughts.
You will learn, she said softly.
Not everything is as it seems. You cannot control what is free. Eli nodded, finally understanding the truth in her words. The real challenge of the ranch, he realized, was not the animals, the land, or even the work itself. It was learning how to coexist with someone who could not be commanded. That night, as they both lay on their separate sleeping mats, the girl reflected on the day. She had survived challenges, observed her surroundings, and tested the cowboy's character. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she also knew that she had strength he could not take from her. She had warned him once, and now he was beginning to understand. Respect, not fear, was the key to living together. Eli, on the other hand, could not sleep easily. The girl's independence and courage had left a deep impression on him. He realized that he had much to learn, not just about managing a ranch, but about respecting others and understanding their worth. The lesson had begun, and he knew it would continue every day they spent together. By the time dawn approached, both had settled into an uneasy but growing partnership. Each understood that the next day would bring more work, more tests, and more lessons. But the foundation had been laid. A mutual, if cautious, respect, and the understanding that life on the frontier required more than strength or money. It required patience, courage, and the willingness to see others as human beings rather than property. And so, as the first light of morning broke across the horizon, the cowboy and the girl prepared to face another day, knowing that their journey together had only just begun, and that every moment would teach them something new about themselves and each other. Days passed on the ranch, each one bringing new challenges and small victories. The cowboy, Eli, and the girl, whose name he had learned was Kaya, were slowly beginning to understand each other. But the peace was fragile, and every moment held the potential for conflict. Eli had thought that $2 could solve a problem, that paying for help meant gaining obedience. He was quickly learning that Kaya's spirit could not be bought. That morning, the sun rose bright and clear over the horizon. The fields shimmered with dew, and the air carried the scent of fresh grass and hay. Eli was already up, feeding the horses and checking the fences. Kaya moved quietly behind him, carrying buckets of water. She had learned the routines quickly, but she did them on her own terms. She was careful, precise, and deliberate. She didn't rush, and she didn't ask for praise. Eli noticed this and felt both admiration and frustration. He had expected a helper, someone who would follow instructions without question. Instead, he had a partner, though a reluctant one, who constantly reminded him that control was an illusion. "Watch the fence line today," Eli said finally, hoping to give her a task without sounding too commanding. "Some of the posts are loose." Kaya glanced at him, nodded, and moved toward the edge of the property. She worked quietly, checking each post and securing them in a methodical way. Eli watched from a distance, noticing how carefully she assessed the problem before acting. He realized that while her methods were different from his, they were effective. As the morning passed, they were interrupted by a commotion near the barn. A group of cattle had broken through a weak section of fence. The animals were scattered across the field, some grazing near the riverbank, others wandering dangerously close to the woods. Eli's first instinct was to shout orders, but Kaya acted before he could speak. She ran quickly to the riverbank, positioning herself where the cattle were likely to move next. Her eyes were sharp, calculating each step the animals would take. Eli followed, trying to help, but he soon noticed that Kaya's approach was smarter than his. She used patience and observation, not force, to guide the animals back toward the pen. "You're amazing," Eli said once the last cow was secured. "I didn't expect you to handle them like that." Kaya didn't smile or boast. She simply nodded.
Experience teaches you to watch and wait, she said.
"Rushing only causes trouble." Eli felt a pang of humility. He had been proud of his years on the ranch, but Kaya's calm intelligence reminded him that experience alone was not enough. The afternoon brought a new challenge. Dark clouds began to gather on the horizon, and the wind picked up, carrying the smell of rain. Eli looked at the sky with concern. "We need to get the animals back into shelter before the storm hits," he said. Kaya didn't hesitate. She worked quickly and efficiently, guiding the horses into the stable and checking the smaller animals. Her movements were precise and confident, showing no fear of the coming storm. When the first drops of rain began to fall, they both stood outside the cabin watching the sky darken. The storm was fierce, with lightning flashing in the distance and the wind rattling the shutters. Kaya's calmness contrasted sharply with Eli's unease. He had faced storms before, but there was something in her demeanor that made him realize he had underestimated her strength. After the storm passed, they inspected the property. Some fences had been damaged, and a few animals had wandered too far, but overall, the ranch had survived the storm. Eli looked at Kaya with a new respect. "You handled that better than I did," he admitted. Kaya shrugged lightly. "You learned to survive by staying calm," she said. "Panic doesn't help anyone." Despite the challenges, there were moments of quiet connection between them. They shared small tasks like mending fences and repairing tools, and even sat together by the fire in the evening. These moments were not filled with conversation, but a silent understanding began to grow. Eli realized that Kaya's presence was not just about help, it was about balance. She challenged him, taught him patience, and reminded him that life was more than control and force. But not all moments were calm. One afternoon, a traveler arrived at the ranch, a man seeking shelter from a long journey. He was rough-looking, with sunburned skin and clothes worn from travel. He introduced himself as a trader and asked for food and rest. Eli welcomed him, but Kaya remained cautious. She had learned to trust her instincts and sensed that the man might not have good intentions. During dinner, the trader tried to impress Eli with stories of far-off places and deals he had made. He glanced at Kaya a few times, and she noticed. Her eyes narrowed, and she positioned herself closer to Eli, ready to act if needed. Eli, initially unaware, began to see the protective stance she took, not out of obedience, but out of careful judgment. As the night deepened, the traveler revealed that he had been searching for work and suggested that Kaya could be useful to him. Eli felt a surge of anger and immediately told the man that Kaya was not for sale or trade. Kaya, too, spoke firmly. "I am not yours," she said to the traveler. "I do not belong to anyone." Her voice was steady and her gaze unwavering. The man, sensing her resolve, fell silent. After the traveler left, Eli turned to Kaya. "I should have known better than to think someone could control you," he said. Kaya looked at him calmly. Control is an illusion, she replied. Respect is the only thing that matters. You're beginning to understand that. Eli nodded, realizing that each day brought new lessons, not just about the ranch, but about life itself. The following days were filled with small tests and victories. Kaya proved herself capable of handling the animals, repairing fences, and even managing the occasional unexpected visitor. Eli watched her with growing respect, realizing that her independence was not a challenge to his authority, but a gift to the ranch. She was teaching him how to lead, not through force, but through example and patience. One afternoon, as they worked in the fields, Eli paused to look at Kaya. "You've changed this place," he said. "I thought I knew what it meant to run a ranch, but you've shown me otherwise." Kaya smiled faintly, a rare expression. "A ranch is more than fences and animals," she said. "It's about care, observation, and understanding. Everything else comes after." As the sun began to set, painting the sky with deep oranges and reds, they sat on a fence, watching the cattle graze. The silence between them was comfortable now, filled with mutual respect rather than tension. Eli understood that he had been wrong to think that $2 could buy obedience. Kaya's presence had brought something far more valuable: wisdom, balance, and a reminder of what it meant to truly lead. That evening, as they prepared for bed, Eli reflected on the lessons of the day. He realized that Kaya had taught him patience, humility, and the importance of observing before acting. She had shown him that strength was not just about physical power, but about intelligence, foresight, and courage. Each day with her was a challenge, but it was also an opportunity to grow. Kaya, lying on her straw mattress, thought about her own lessons. She had learned that survival required more than strength. It required understanding the people around her, predicting their actions, and protecting herself without giving up her independence.
Eli had been a challenge, but she saw potential in him.
Perhaps, she thought, they could coexist not as master and servant, but as partners, each learning from the other. As night fell over the ranch, a gentle wind rustled the trees, carrying the scent of grass and rain from the storm. The animals settled down and the cabin was quiet, except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. Both Eli and Kaya drifted to sleep, knowing that the next day would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to understand each other. Life on the frontier was harsh, unpredictable, and often dangerous. But in the quiet moments between storms and chores, there was also growth, understanding, and the promise of something stronger than fear or control. Respect, courage. And so, as the stars appeared above the ranch, Eli and Kaya faced the future together, aware that the journey ahead would test them in ways they could not yet imagine.
But both were ready, each strengthened by the lessons of the past and the growing understanding of the other.
The days on the ranch had grown longer and harder. Spring was turning to summer, and with the changing season came both opportunities and challenges. Eli and Kaya had settled into a rhythm, though it was fragile and often tested by the unpredictable life on the frontier. Each day brought new lessons for both of them, and the bond between them grew, built not on obedience or ownership, but on respect and understanding. One morning the air was filled with the fresh scent of rain from the night before. Dew sparkled on the grass and the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. Ellie had been checking the fences when he noticed Kaya moving through the fields, her hands steady as she guided a group of young calves toward the barn. She had grown confident in her work, handling the animals with care and foresight that reminded him of his own father's methods, though she did it with a grace and patience he admired. "Good morning," Eli called, trying to sound casual. "Looks like the calves are behaving today." Kaya glanced at him and smiled faintly. "Mostly," she replied. "Some of them need a little guidance." Her tone was calm, precise, and without arrogance. Eli realized she was not simply following instructions anymore. She was taking initiative, observing and deciding for herself what needed to be done. The morning passed with the usual chores, feeding the animals, checking the fences, and repairing tools. But by midday, a problem arose that neither of them could ignore. A small fire had started near the edge of the property, likely from a stray spark from a passing traveler's campfire or a lightning strike during the previous storm. The flames were small but spreading quickly through the dry grass. Eli's heart raced as he grabbed a bucket of water and ran toward the fire, shouting for Kaya to help. Kaya was already moving, her hands steady and purposeful. She helped Eli form a line with buckets, dousing the flames before they could spread further. Smoke filled the air and the heat stung their skin, but they worked tirelessly side by side until the fire was finally under control. When it was over, both were covered in soot and sweat, their clothes damp from the water. They collapsed onto the ground, breathing heavily, and watched as the last wisps of smoke disappeared into the sky. "You were incredible," Eli said, finally catching his breath. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Kaya looked at him calmly. "We both worked together," she said. "That's how problems are solved. Not by panic, but by thinking and acting quickly." Eli nodded slowly. Her words stayed with him. He realized that her wisdom was not just in her strength or courage, but in her ability to remain calm under pressure, a skill he had not fully mastered. The fire had left the land slightly damaged, and they spent the rest of the afternoon repairing the burnt patches of grass and checking the fences for weaknesses. As they worked, Eli began to see something he had not noticed before. Kaya had a natural talent for leadership. She did not order him around, nor did she seek to dominate, but she had a way of guiding actions through observation and quiet authority. Even the animals seemed to respond to her presence. By evening, exhaustion had set in. The sky was painted in soft pinks and purples, and a gentle breeze rustled the trees. They sat on a fallen log, taking a brief rest before returning to the cabin. Eli finally spoke, breaking the comfortable silence. "Kaya, I've been thinking. I've learned more from you in these past weeks than I ever expected. Not about ranch work, but about life itself." Kaya looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Life is about understanding and adapting," she said. "Strength alone is not enough. Wisdom and patience matter too."
Eli smiled faintly.
"I should have understood that the first day I brought you here," he admitted. "I thought $2 could solve everything. I thought control was the answer, but I see now that it's respect that matters." Kaya nodded slightly, acknowledging his words. There was no boastfulness in her demeanor, only quiet affirmation. Eli realized that she had taught him something he would never forget. The following days brought more challenges. A group of travelers passed near the ranch, some looking for work, others simply moving through. One afternoon, a young boy from the nearby town wandered too close to the pasture and frightened a group of cattle. The animals scattered, and Eli had to act quickly to prevent injury. Kaya was already running toward the herd, her hands steady, her mind calculating every move. Together, they guided the animals back safely, once again proving the strength of their teamwork. Through these challenges, the bond between them grew stronger. They had learned to communicate without words, anticipating each other's actions and understanding each other's intentions. Eli began to see Kaya not just as a helper, but as a partner. Her warnings, which he had once dismissed, now carried weight. Her independence was not a challenge to him. It was a strength that made the ranch run more smoothly than he could have imagined, alone. One afternoon, a more serious challenge arrived. A sudden illness struck one of the horses, leaving it weak and unable to stand. Eli had some experience with animals, but he realized quickly that he would need Kaya's help. Together, they worked carefully, moving the horse to the barn and attending to it. Kaya mixed a poultice, monitored the animal's breathing, and offered calm guidance. Eli followed her instructions, watching in awe as her confidence and skill brought the horse back from the brink. "You've saved it," Eli said finally, relief evident in his voice. Kaya shook her head. "We both did," she said. "You helped too, but staying calm and focused was the key." Eli understood again that she had a perspective he often lacked. Her courage, intelligence, and foresight were qualities that he could learn from, and he knew that his respect for her was growing with every passing day. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the fields, Eli and Kaya sat on the porch of the cabin. The sky was a brilliant orange, fading into deep purple as the stars began to appear. They had spent the day working hard, learning from each other and facing challenges together. Eli realized that he no longer thought of Kaya as someone he had bought. She was a teacher, a guide, and a companion in the difficult life of the frontier. That night, as they lay on their separate sleeping mats, Eli reflected on the journey so far. He had expected obedience and control, but instead he had found wisdom, courage, and resilience. Kaya had taught him patience, humility, and the importance of observing before acting. Each day brought new lessons, and he understood that their partnership was built on more than necessity. It was built on mutual respect. Kaya, too, thought about the day. She had faced fires, frightened animals, and the challenges of a man who had underestimated her. Yet she had proven to herself that she could survive not through submission but through intelligence, calm action, and strength of character. Eli was learning slowly to see her as an equal rather than property, and she recognized the potential for a partnership that could withstand even the harshest frontier challenges. By the time dawn approached, both were ready for another day, knowing that the life of a rancher was unpredictable and full of trials. Yet they also knew that together they could face whatever came their way. Their relationship had evolved from one of control and defiance into one of understanding and respect. And as the first light of morning broke across the horizon, Eli and Kaya prepared to face the new day, aware that the journey ahead would continue to test them, teach them, and strengthen the bond they were forming. The lessons of the frontier were many, but the most important was clear. Strength alone could not ensure survival, and respect could not be bought. It had to be earned, nurtured, and shared. The summer sun rose bright over the ranch, casting a warm glow across the fields. The days were long, and the work never seemed to end, yet there was a rhythm now. A rhythm born of patience, experience, and understanding. Eli and Kaya had faced many challenges together, and their partnership had grown stronger with each passing day. They had learned to respect each other, to trust each other, and to value each other's strengths. That morning, Eli walked through the fields, checking the fences and observing the cattle. He noticed the calm way Kaya moved among the animals, guiding them without shouting, without fear, and without force. She had grown confident and capable, but she had also grown wise. Eli admired her strength, but more than that, he admired her insight. The way she could see a problem before it became serious, the way she could anticipate challenges, and the way she treated all living creatures with care and respect. "Kaya," Eli called, shading his eyes from the sun. "We need to check the northern fence. Some of the posts look weak after the last storm." Kaya nodded and joined him, carrying the tools they would need. As they worked together, there was a quiet understanding between them. They no longer needed to explain every action. Each knew what the other would do, and each respected the other's abilities. While repairing the fence, they noticed smoke rising from a nearby hill. At first, they feared another fire, but as they drew closer, they realized it was a controlled blaze. Other ranchers had started a small fire to clear dry brush safely. Still, the smoke reminded them of how quickly danger could arrive on the frontier, and both moved carefully, checking their own land for any signs of trouble. By midday, the ranch seemed peaceful again, and Eli decided to take a short break. He sat under a large oak tree, watching Kaya handle the animals with ease. She was gentle but firm, moving among the horses and cattle as if she had always belonged here. Eli reflected on the journey that had brought her to his ranch, the day he had paid $2 and brought her here, and how that decision had changed both of their lives.
"Eli," Kaya said, breaking the silence, "do you remember what you said to me the first day? That you could buy my work, but not my spirit?"
I remember, he said. I've thought about it every day since then.
Kaya smiled faintly, a rare warmth in her expression. "And now?" she asked. "Now I see," he said, "that you were right. Respect, trust, and understanding matter far more than money or control. You've taught me that." The words hung in the air, filled with sincerity and reflection. Eli realized that Kaya had not only taught him about life on the ranch, but about life itself. She had shown him courage, intelligence, and the strength of character that could not be purchased or forced. He felt a deep gratitude, not just for her work, but for her guidance and wisdom. That afternoon brought another test, though not one of danger. A neighboring rancher came by to discuss a possible partnership. He wanted to buy some of Eli's cattle and asked if Kaya could help manage the trade. Eli glanced at her, and Kaya met his eyes with quiet confidence. She nodded, understanding what was expected without needing instructions. Together, they prepared the cattle, documented the records, and negotiated the trade with efficiency and fairness. Eli was impressed, not just by her skill, but by the way she carried herself with integrity and intelligence. The evening fell, painting the sky in shades of red and purple. Eli and Kaya sat outside the cabin, tired but satisfied. The ranch was running smoothly. The animals were safe, and the fences were secure. They had faced storms, fires, challenges with animals, and unexpected visitors, yet they had endured and thrived. Eli looked at Kaya and realized something important. He no longer saw her as someone he had bought. She was his partner, his equal, and a friend. "Kaya," he said softly, "I've learned more from you than I could have imagined. You've taught me patience, courage, and understanding." "You've shown me what it means to truly lead." Kaya looked at him steadily. "And you've learned," she replied, "that respect and trust matter more than fear or control. That is how partnerships survive, how people thrive." Eli nodded, feeling the truth of her words. As night fell, a gentle breeze rustled the trees, and the stars began to shine above the ranch. The animals settled down for the night, and the cabin was quiet except for the crackle of the fireplace. Eli and Kaya sat together in silence, reflecting on all they had faced. The frontier was unpredictable, full of trials, but they had learned to face it together, each bringing their strengths, wisdom, and courage. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Eli and Kaya continued to work together, building not only a successful ranch but a partnership based on mutual respect. They shared tasks, solved problems, and celebrated small victories. Each challenge, whether a storm, a sick animal, or a difficult repair, became an opportunity to learn from each other. Their relationship had evolved from one of control and defiance into one of understanding, trust, and friendship. One summer morning, a traveling family passed by the ranch. The children were curious and shy, watching Kaya as she guided the animals with confidence and calm. They asked her questions about her life, about the animals, and about the ranch. Kaya answered patiently, explaining each task and demonstrating her knowledge. Eli watched quietly, feeling pride in her strength and wisdom. She had become a teacher, not just for him, but for others as well. Later that day, Eli found himself reflecting on the lessons of the past months. He remembered the first day he had paid $2, thinking he could control another human being. He had learned a hard truth. No amount of money could buy respect, obedience, or loyalty. Those were earned through actions, integrity, and understanding. Kaya had taught him that in ways he would never forget. Kaya, too, thought about the journey. She had been brought to the ranch against her will, yet she had found a way to assert her independence, to survive and to thrive. She had faced challenges, dangers, and doubts, but she had remained true to herself. Through her courage, intelligence, and careful observation, she had forged a partnership with Eli based on respect rather than fear, a partnership that had grown stronger with every passing day. By the end of summer, the ranch was thriving. The fields were lush, the animals healthy, and the fences secure. Eli and Kaya had faced storms, fires, challenges with visitors, and the daily work of frontier life. Each trial had brought them closer together, teaching them the value of patience, courage, and respect. They had learned that true strength was not in force or control, but in understanding, compassion, and cooperation. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, Eli and Kaya stood together on a small rise overlooking the ranch. The wind carried the scent of grass and the distant sound of cattle. Eli turned to Kaya and said, "I know now that I was wrong at first. I thought I could buy your obedience, but you've taught me that respect cannot be bought. You've changed this ranch, and you've changed me." Kaya smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the last light of the sun. "And you've learned what I have always known," she replied. "That true strength is in respect, courage, and understanding. That is how we survive and thrive together." The sun dipped below the horizon, leaving the sky painted in shades of pink, purple, and gold. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and safe. Eli and Kaya had faced many challenges, yet they had emerged stronger, wiser, and united. The lessons of the frontier, hardship, danger, and perseverance, had shaped them both. But the most important lesson of all was clear. Respect, trust, and cooperation were the true foundation of survival and success. As night fell, they walked back to the cabin together, side by side. The stars sparkled above, and the ranch settled into quiet slumber. Eli understood that his life had been forever changed, not by the $2 he had spent, but by the courage, wisdom, and independence of the girl he had once thought he could control. Kaya had proven that her spirit could not be bought, her mind could not be controlled, and her courage could not be broken. And in doing so, she had taught Eli, and perhaps herself, that even in a harsh and unpredictable world, respect, understanding, and partnership could create something strong, lasting, and meaningful. As they reached the cabin, they looked out over the ranch one last time that evening, knowing that life would continue to bring challenges. But they also knew that together they could face anything. The journey that began with $2 had become a story of growth, resilience, and the unbreakable strength of respect. And so, under the wide, starry sky, the cowboy and the girl, no longer master and servant but equals, stood together, ready for whatever the future might hold, confident that their partnership, built on courage, wisdom, and mutual respect, would endure.